She didn't notice when it started. The slow bending of her own boundaries, the quiet swallowing of her own needs, the subtle way she rearranged her entire life so no would ever feel disappointed with her. It didn't happen in a single moment. It happened in the small ones. The moments she said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. The moments she smiled when her heart was begging for rest. The moments she stayed available even when her soul was falling apart. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She was just trying to keep everyone happy. Because somewhere along the way, she learned that her worth was tied to her usefulness. So she became the reliable one, the strong one, the one who always listened, always forgave, always adjusted, always softened her edges so no one would feel uncomfortable. She learned to anticipate needs before anyone expressed them. She learned to ease tension before it became conflict. She learned to carry emotions that weren't hers to carry. And she learned to hide the weight so no one would ever worry about her. People called her mature, selfless, wise, but none of them knew how much she was breaking inside. For years, she mistook exhaustion for responsibility and silence for strength. She believed that loving people meant never disappointing them, never saying no, never expressing pain, never letting herself be anything other than what they needed her to be. She wasn't living a life, she was performing one, and every day she lost a little more of herself. Her preferences, her joy, her softness, her dreams, her voice, all traded quietly for the hope that someone, anyone, would finally look at her and say, "You don't have to earn my love." But no one did. Instead, the more she gave, the more they expected. The more she served, the more invisible she felt. The more she tried to keep everyone happy, the more she disappeared. And in the deepest, quietest part of her heart, she whispered a truth that terrified her. If I ever stop pleasing everyone, will I still be loved? She carried that question like a wound. She carried it into friendships, relationships, family. She carried it into her faith, her identity, her adult life. And it shaped her into a woman who knew how to be everything for everyone, except herself. She didn't remember the last time she asked for something without apologizing first. She didn't remember the last time she rested without guilt. She didn't remember the last time she said, "I'm hurting," without immediately following it with, "But it's okay." Her world became a place where everyone else's comfort came before her truth, where everyone's needs were more urgent than her own, where her worth depended on how little space she took. But one day, a day that didn't look special at all, a day like any other, something inside her snapped quietly. Not in anger, not in rebellion, not in bitterness. It broke in honesty. She felt a tiredness that didn't come from the body, a weariness that didn't come from lack of sleep, a heaviness that was deeper than anything physical. It was the weight of a lifetime spent holding everyone else together, while slowly falling apart alone. And in that quiet breaking, she met a version of herself she hadn't seen in years. The girl she used to be before she learned that pleasing others was safer than being herself. For the first time in a long time, she wondered, who am I when I'm not trying to keep everyone happy? And that question, fragile and trembling, was the start of her becoming whole again. This is her story. Maybe it's yours too. She didn't become a people pleaser because she was weak. She became one because somewhere in her story, she learned that being easy was safer than being honest. It wasn't a personality trait. It was survival. It was the way she kept peace, kept connection, kept herself from being abandoned. Long before adulthood, she noticed something. When she stayed quiet, people liked her more. When she didn't complain, no one got upset. When she helped without being asked, she felt needed. And being needed felt a little like being loved. So she learned early that saying yes protected her from rejection, that agreeing with everyone protected her from conflict, that shrinking her needs protected her from being labeled difficult. that carrying the emotional weight of others protected her from being left behind. She thought it was kindness, but it was fear. Fear disguised as generosity, fear dressed in politeness, fear masked as compassion. As she grew older, this reflex hardened into identity. She didn't even think before responding. She automatically said, "Of course," even when she was drowning. She said, "No problem," even when it cost her peace. She said, "I don't mind," even when she was breaking. People praised her. "You're amazing. You always know what to do. You're so understanding. You're so patient. You're the easiest person to be around." But none of them realized that each compliment was built on a piece of her she had cut away. Because the truth was simple and devastating. She wasn't easy. She was exhausted. She wasn't selfless. She was scared. She wasn't naturally agreeable. She was afraid that disagreement would cost her love she had never believed she deserved in the first place. So she made herself small to keep relationships big. She silenced her voice to keep others comfortable. She overextended herself so no one would ever have a reason to walk away. And the saddest part? She didn't even realize she was doing it. It felt normal, automatic, expected. Until one day she noticed something. Everyone around her felt cared for, supported, understood, except her. She was the shoulder, the listener, the helper, the anchor, the stabilizer, the one everyone leaned on. But who leaned on her? Who held her? Who asked her if she was okay? She had built an entire identity around being necessary, and yet she felt more invisible than she had ever felt in her life. That's when it hit her. Not suddenly, but painfully clearly. She had spent years pleasing people to feel safe, and all she felt was alone. And in that realization, the foundation of her old identity began to crack, not in anger, but in truth. Because trying to keep everyone happy had cost her the very thing she needed the most, herself. There is a unique heaviness that comes from being the responsible one, the one who always shows up, the one who always understands, the one who keeps everything together even when she is quietly falling apart. She never asked for that role, but life assigned it to her anyway, and she accepted it because she thought she had no right to break under a weight everyone else seemed sure she could carry. People depended on her without ever asking if she had the strength to give. They assumed her endurance, assumed her stability, assumed her emotional availability, assumed her silence was peace when, in reality, it was the only way she knew to survive the pressure. She became everyone's safe place, but had no safe place of her own. When someone was hurting, they called her. When a crisis happened, they came to her. When a conflict erupted, she was the mediator. When someone needed comfort, she held them. When someone needed understanding, she listened. When someone fell apart, she picked up the pieces. Not once did anyone stop to wonder whether she had pieces of her own that were scattered across the floor of her quiet, private life. People admired her strength because they never saw the cost of it. They never saw the nights she cried alone in the shower, because it was the only place where no one could interrupt her breakdown with another expectation. They never saw the texts she typed and deleted because she didn't want to burden anyone. They never saw the fear of being needed beyond her capacity, but loved only for her usefulness. Being the strong one didn't feel like honor. It felt like imprisonment, a silent responsibility she never consented to, but felt obligated to uphold. She carried the emotional weight of her world because she believed that dropping it would make everything collapse, not just for her, but for the people she loved. And that is what broke her the most. Not the weight itself, but the belief that she had no permission to set it down. Her friends praised her resilience. Her family praised her maturity. Her church praised her service. Her workplace praised her reliability. But none of them knew how heavy the applause felt when it came attached to expectations she could no longer meet. Because being the one everyone depends on means living inside a paradox. Everyone sees your strength. No one sees your breaking. Everyone recognizes your giving. No one notices your exhaustion. Everyone comes to you when their world collapses. No one stays when yours begins to crumble. And in the quiet moments when she finally admitted to herself that she was tired in the kind of way sleep couldn't fix, she faced a truth she had avoided her whole life. She was never meant to carry everyone. And the moment she dared to let that truth touch her, even just for a second, the weight she had been holding for years shifted. Not because it disappeared, but because she finally realized she didn't owe her entire soul to the comfort of others. This was the beginning of her breaking free. There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who never truly see you. That was the loneliness she lived with. A quiet, suffocating isolation hidden behind a smile she had learned to wear like armor. Most people thought she was fine. How could they not? She laughed at the right moments. She encouraged others with warmth. She carried conversations with grace. She made everyone feel safe in her presence. But none of them knew that every time she stayed strong for someone else, she felt herself fading a little more. She became an expert at hiding her pain. She could mask her exhaustion with politeness. She could dissolve her sadness behind a soft tone. She could swallow her tears before they ever reached her eyes. She smiled, not because she was okay, but because she didn't know how to be anything else. Sometimes, she wondered if anyone sensed the truth behind her calm expression. If anyone noticed how her eyes dimmed whenever she wasn't the one uplifting the room. If anyone could see the loneliness that grew quietly inside her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. People said she was so strong, but they never asked how much it cost her to be that way. They praised her for never complaining, but never asked why she felt she couldn't. They admired her ability to always be there, but didn't realize she had no one to run to when she needed someone too. And the truth cut deeper than she expected. The more she gave, the fewer people seemed able to give back. The more she supported others, the less support she received. The more she held everyone together, the more she fell apart alone. Her smile was beautiful, but it was heavy. It wasn't an expression. It was a shield, a disguise, a way to survive in a world where she felt she wasn't allowed to be fragile. Sometimes she wished someone would look past her smile and see her trembling underneath. She wished someone would notice the way her hands shook when she forced herself to be cheerful. She wished someone would hear the silence in her voice when she said, "I'm okay." She didn't want pity. She wanted presence. She wanted someone, just one person, to care enough to see her without her performance. But most people only noticed her smile. They didn't notice the woman behind it. And that was the kind of loneliness that hurt the most. Not the loneliness of being unseen, but of being seen only when she was useful. Only when she was strong. Only when she made life easier for everyone but herself. She kept smiling because she didn't know how to stop. She kept showing up because she didn't know what would happen if she finally let herself be honest. She kept carrying her loneliness in silence because she feared that if people saw the real weight she carried, they would walk away. But deep in her heart, a quiet truth was forming. This loneliness was not a punishment. It was a warning. A warning that she had built a life where everyone else's comfort mattered more than her own truth. And somewhere inside her, even if softly, she knew she couldn't keep living like that. For most of her life, she believed that love was measured by how much she was willing to give up. She thought sacrifice made relationships stronger. She thought silence kept the peace. She thought selflessness made her worthy. No one told her that there is a difference between loving someone and losing yourself to keep them comfortable. She didn't realize that every time she erased a little piece of herself to make someone else stay, she wasn't choosing love. She was choosing fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being too much. And fear is a terrible foundation for love. Looking back, she saw the ways she disappeared slowly, like a shadow losing shape. Not because he asked her to, but because she believed that her honesty, her needs, her boundaries, her real self were inconveniences she had to remove. She thought love demanded that she carry emotional weight alone. She thought love meant never upsetting anyone. She thought love required her to be endlessly patient, endlessly understanding, endlessly forgiving, even when no one offered her the same grace. She didn't see that the kind of love she was giving was actually costing her the parts of herself she needed the most. Her softness, her voice, her joy, her identity, her rest, her sense of being human. The truth she finally faced was painful, cruel even, because it forced her to admit something she had been avoiding for years. If loving someone requires the death of who you are, it's not love, it's captivity. If caring for someone demands that you never care for yourself, it's not devotion, it's self-neglect. If being in someone's life requires you to disappear in your own, it's not connection, it's erasure. And the man she tried so hard to please? The relationship she held onto with bleeding hands? The people she bent herself to keep? They didn't love her more just because she gave more. She simply became easier to take for granted. She realized painfully that the love she believed she was protecting had never really protected her. It allowed her to break quietly. It allowed her to carry everything alone. It allowed her to apologize for emotions no human should have to hide. It allowed her to serve without ever being served. It allowed her to stay in a life where her value was measured by how little she needed. She mistook compliance for connection. She mistook giving for intimacy. She mistook disappearing for strength. But losing yourself isn't holy. It isn't noble. It isn't the mark of a good heart. It's the evidence that your heart has been carrying far too much pain for far too long. And the moment she finally admitted that, the illusion shattered. She didn't lose him. She lost herself trying to keep him. And that truth, raw, honest, unfiltered, was what finally woke her up. Because real love doesn't ask for your disappearance. Real love makes room for your presence. She didn't choose herself in a moment of anger. She didn't choose herself out of revenge, or bitterness, or rebellion. She chose herself because she finally understood that staying the way she was meant slowly dying in silence. And she was done, dying quietly. The day everything changed was ordinary. No dramatic goodbye, no slammed doors, no emotional outburst. It was a simple morning when she looked at her reflection, really looked, and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her face looked familiar, but her eyes carried a sadness she could no longer deny. In that moment, something inside her whispered with a strength she didn't know she still had. You deserve to exist too. Not as support, not as background, not as emotional furniture for everyone else's comfort, but as a person, a whole person, with a voice, with needs, with limits, with a soul that deserved gentleness. For years, she believed choosing herself would make her selfish. She believed that protecting her peace would disappoint people. She believed that setting boundaries would make others think less of her, and she feared that losing their approval would mean losing love. But the truth hit her with quiet, devastating clarity. If choosing herself made someone stop loving her, they never loved her in the first place. So she shifted, not loudly, but deeply. She stopped apologizing for resting. She stopped apologizing for saying no. She stopped apologizing for needing space. She stopped apologizing for not being everyone's solution. She stopped apologizing for being human. And as she let go of the people who only loved her when she made herself small, something miraculous happened. She began to breathe. Her heart got lighter. Her mind got quieter. Her spirit, once exhausted, began to stretch in ways she had forgotten were possible. She didn't become hard. She didn't become cold. She didn't become selfish. She became honest. Honest about her limits. Honest about her wounds. Honest about her worth. Honest about the life she refused to keep living. And that honesty became a doorway to freedom. Her journey wasn't perfect. Some days she missed her old patterns. Some days she still felt guilty for putting herself first. Some days she trembled while choosing what scared her most, her own dignity. But every time she chose herself, without apologizing, she rebuilt a part of her soul she once believed was gone forever. And now, when she looks in the mirror, she sees someone real, someone whole, someone brave enough to no longer disappear. She didn't choose herself because she stopped caring about others. She chose herself because she finally understood that she mattered too. And that choice, quiet, sacred, unshakable, was the beginning of her becoming the woman she was always meant to be.